The number one question that we had was, how would you assess the state and federal response to the train derailment in East Palestine?
Well, I'd say it's disappointing in many ways. You had a lot of people involved that made the decision to do the slow burn. I can't decide myself whether that was the appropriate thing to do or not, but you had local firefighters and you had the EPA from surrounding areas and the U.S. EPA as well as Ohio and Pennsylvania. They made that decision. My concern, one, I'm grateful, one, that no one has died immediately, I would say, and I think it's fair to put it that way, because of the toxicity of so many things that were released. We still don't know. Reportedly, 3,500 fish were estimated have died, so that tells you something about what may be going through the environment, the safety of our water, the safety of our air, all of those things that come into play. And very disappointing that you didn't have high-level officials on the ground immediately. And it doesn't seem like there's like a standard operating procedure for something like this.
Right.
In some defense, what I've read is 99.9% of all hazardous material that's shipped by rail makes their destination without a problem. That's a pretty good record, but when you have that 0.1% and that many lives can be affected by it, obviously it's an important thing. So it didn't seem that there was an immediate response from the federal government in the way that you would hope. Sometimes it seems like the EPA can be there for a lot of things that maybe impede your progress in some ways. But when you actually need their help, how much of it was really there? But I do give a lot of respect to the community and how the whole nation is paying attention to this, praying for the people in that area. And it was interesting to see former President Trump go there. And really, that's, I think, maybe what has inspired the transportation secretary to show up yesterday.
What really surprised me was the fact that these rail cars can be considered empty and still have up to 500 gallons of any particular substance that they might be transporting. I found that fairly interesting too. We found that from our emergency management director here this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. When you empty a bottle, there's still some water still in there.
Right, just the larger container.
That's a pretty high amount that you would think, and so I don't know if they're going to change the standards after this for maybe very good reasons. It seems to me that you can vacuum it out, or should be able to have the technology to vacuum it out. So lessons learned, like anything else, and I'm not trying to be overcritical until we get all the facts on the ground of what actually happened, what led to it. They talk about some overheating taking place, and maybe that led to the problem. Let's get all the facts on the ground, and I don't want to accuse too much. But, in a situation like that, you do want to see leadership present and not just from afar talking about it. I think it makes a difference to the people for their morale to know that someone really cares and will address the situation as they're required to do or should be doing.
Okay. And I'll just go to our next question. So in your mind, what is the number one priority for the new congressional term?
There's many number ones, and because they've been brewing for a few years, so it makes a difference when you're in the majority, obviously. I sit on the House Intelligence Committee, so there's a lot of things I've always been working about when it comes to our national security, for sure. And that encompasses a lot of things, but I've had some focus, especially since COVID, going through the Intelligence Committee on the health of America and the safety of America. So we also have a doctor's caucus, and there's about 18 of us on the Republican side in the House of Representatives. So origins of COVID, the effects of COVID on our health, that has been very, very important. Out of all of that, besides just trying to figure out the origins of COVID, China's role in all of this, it's important that we know the origins if we're going to be able in the future to try to predict a pandemic, to prepare for a pandemic, and hopefully protect ourselves and prevent one if possible. So the Speaker has set up a select subcommittee that he's asked me to chair. And this will encompass everything to do with the pandemic. So, the effects on the economy, the programs we put in place to try and get us through it economically,
Okay.
waste, fraud, and abuse that may have occurred and has occurred. Unemployment insurance is a classic one. So, between this subcommittee and Ways and Means Committee, I'll be working on that because I'm also on Ways and Means Committee.
Okay.
And so the fraud is a great concern through us there. But everything to the origins of COVID and what we want to do in the future, the role of our agencies. Did they function efficiently? Do we need to change how our agencies work, like the Food and Drug Administration, the CDC, all of those things? So it's an after-action review, lessons learned, path forward, and hopefully a pathway to having preparedness and readiness at its peak. Again, I concern about our national defense and our health overall. So let's parlay that into the health of America. Often in America we say healthcare, and people immediately think about their insurance plan and whether they have access or not. I want to focus on the health of America. What are our problems? What are our things that would put people at risk? We often talk about, in the United States, except for overdoses and suicides, you can live a pretty long time.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things, you break it, we can fix it. And that's good stuff. But how do we prevent some things? Or how do we take people that have chronic illnesses and keep them as healthy as we possibly can for as long as we possibly can? For those that are just looking at healthcare in terms of dollars and cents, you're going to save a lot of money when you prevent things. You're going to save a lot of money when you keep people healthy. And I think that's where our focus needs to be. So we want to drive towards new innovations and cures. I look at how we have a cure for hepatitis C. I never would have thought we'd have something like that, right? And immediately the reaction from so many was, well, that's pretty costly treatment. And it is. A lot of times those treatments, the costs come down. But think about what you spend when you don't cure it.
Right.
And that's where the real savings comes in. So as we look at health and so many other things, we have to look for the return on investment. And so, yeah, we may spend a fair amount to cure you of hepatitis C, but you're not looking for a liver transplant. And you're not being hospitalized over and over again from the illnesses that can come forward from that. So that's just how we have to think and move forward as far as health. Always concerned with economic development. I think that there's nothing better for someone's psyche and everything else if there's a job associated, that you get up with a purpose every day. And the reason I say that too is something that we can look with our veterans. A lot of times you have people that have served in the military and every day they wake up with a purpose and there's a team waiting for them that needs them and they're part of something bigger than themselves. And if they get out and they have nowhere else to go, that's when the spiral starts going downward.
Yeah.
I'd like for us in the military, for example, to start from day one. You're talking to a recruiter. Oh, what do you want to do in the military? I'd like to do infantry. Okay, well, here's what's involved with that. Let me ask you this. What do you want to do after you're in the military? And can this be the pathway to your next career? Because even if you stay 20 years, there's usually another career waiting for you if you play your cards right. So let's work on that as a country and really help those that serve the country. So that's where economic development comes in and jobs. And you saw with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act before COVID, we had no inversions. Companies were not leaving the United States. More companies were coming in. We had more people employed than ever before, especially in minority categories. And so things were humming along pretty well until COVID hit us. And so how do we get back to that? The other thing that we recognize through COVID is we have a dangerous supply chain. Yes. And we are now fully aware that we rely too much on China for too many things that affect our health, generic medications, all of these types of things. We saw that with masks and medical supplies. Right. We have to be very cautious and we have to be smart about bringing industry back into the United States, put Americans to work, have a good domestic supply chain that we can count on, not just one place here or one place there, but a good domestic supply chain. And that's across the board. And I encourage any business to take a look at where you get things. We're doing this in the military now, right? And trying to figure it out and then deviate away from it. But know where you get the things that you need for your job to go forward, for your company to survive, and make sure that you have ample access to everything that you need, especially in manufacturing.
And so what? And just to call back to that a little bit, the tour prior to this interview at PQM, what are some of the first steps that we can take, at the state or federal levels to, as you had mentioned, with the FDA, for example, to, in some instances, like with the approvals that Mr. Stockmeister, and his team are seeking, and the hurdles they've had to jump through, and the rejections, and not being able to, fix a minor mistake, have to start all over again in the process, start all over on the tests, et cetera. What are some of the first steps that we would need to take at the government level to make these agencies less adversarial to the process to improve our supply chain situation?
Well, I think one of the first things you can do is invite your congressman in
Mm-hmm.
to your facility and discuss the problems that you're having with the federal government, which is what we do on so many fronts. Whether it's constituent service, if they're having a problem with the VA, the IRS,
Right.
with Medicare, whatever, they call our office, and we try to be the conduit between the federal agencies or government component that we're struggling with. I was talking about that subcommittee. We're going to look at the CDC. We're going to look at the FDA. We're going to look at, say, things like how long does it take to get certified or permitting for things? And can we speed those things up? Because we've got to, otherwise we're going to fall behind the rest of the world. And we have to be better at it. And maybe we need more people to process things, but we got to figure that out. So the awareness that you can get to your member of Congress, I think, is the first start. We're here, boots on the ground with you. We see what the situation is, and then we want to hear what the result has been on the other end so we can intervene, try and speed the process up, or make changes within an agency that can make things better.
Okay. And what are you already asked you that? How can bipartisan progress be made when it seems as though Republicans and Democrats are just unable to meet anywhere in the middle?
Yeah, I would say that that's not as true as you might think. There are so many things I've gotten done in a bipartisan fashion. And just going to that select subcommittee, for example, when Speaker McCarthy asked me to chair that, I immediately called a Democrat physician who I've worked with on many bills. We came in together 10 years ago. We get along. We know where we differ politically, but we know what we can get done. We've worked on things like the Mission Act for our veterans and things in healthcare, the No Surprises Act. We were co-chairs of the Burn Pit Caucus, the burn pits that have affected many of our veterans in theater from toxicities there again. So I called him right away. I said, try to get on this committee. As a matter of fact, try to be ranking member. And he got it. And I went to the new leader of the Democrat Party, and I thanked him for putting him on because I think we can proceed together well. But it happens more than people know. Most bills are bipartisan. They get through. What we found in the last couple of years especially is things weren't going through committee. When they go through committee, then you usually come to a bipartisan conclusion. I'm on Ways and Means, for example. There's very few times that we present a bill that's within our jurisdiction that we don't make it bipartisan from the very beginning, that you have, but people don't see that, right?
Right.
But the problem is, too, when you have bills that are coming down from the White House to, say, Nancy Pelosi, and then brought to the committee rather than the committee creating the bill and bringing it up to the White House, that's where things go awry, and that's where they become very partisan. And I think America's seen enough of that, and I hope that we can proceed better now that we have the House and the Senate still on the Democrat side. So, things are going to have to be done in a more bipartisan way, and hopefully we'll see that and get some good results for the country.